Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a seriously provocative text from 1928 that completely pulls back the curtain on the hidden mechanics of modern society. We're looking at Edward Bernays' seminal work, simply titled Propaganda. Let's just dive right into this, because what Bernays laid out nearly a century ago, it's absolutely going to change how you view the world around you today. Right on the very first page of his book, Bernays hits us with this incredible opening thesis. He writes, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society." And here's the thing, he isn't whispering this as some dark, sinister conspiracy. Not at all. He's stating it objectively, basically as a mechanical fact of how modern nations function. He argues that those who manipulate this unseen mechanism actually constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. So let me ask you, did you really make your own choices today? I mean, from the clothes you threw on this morning to the breakfast you ate, all the way to the political opinions you hold. We all really like to think of ourselves as fiercely independent thinkers, but Bernays completely challenges this core assumption. He presents this fascinating problem-solution narrative for society, and to understand his solution, we first have to wrap our heads around the massive problem he saw in the world. Section 1. The threat of chaos in a complex society. You see, Bernays viewed modern society as overwhelmingly complex and just inherently chaotic. Think about it like this. In theory, every single citizen makes up their own mind on public questions and private conduct. But in practice, Bernays points out that if all of us had to deeply research the complex economic, political, and ethical data involved in literally every single choice we make, we'd find it impossible to come to a conclusion about anything. Without some kind of organization, our daily choices would paralyze us. Our lives would just become hopelessly jammed. To illustrate this, he gives a really practical example. Imagine if, every single time you went to the store, you had to chemically test and price compare dozens of different soaps, fabrics, or brands of bread before buying anything. You would literally never make it out of the grocery store. So, to avoid this endless confusion, Bernays argues that society voluntarily consents to have its choices narrowed down. We actually agree to let an invisible government sift through all the data, highlight the big issues, and narrow our field of choice to practical proportions. Section 2. Our invisible government and guiding the masses. Now, Bernays' highly controversial solution to this societal chaos relies entirely on this invisible government. Let's look at how this power dynamic shifted over time. Back in the era of kings, power was absolute. As Bernays notes, Louis XIV could modestly say, "I am the state," and well, he was pretty much right. But then, the Industrial Revolution happened. The steam engine, the printing press, the public school system, these completely stripped power from kings and handed it directly to the people. Universal suffrage and universal schooling meant the masses suddenly had real, tangible power. But, Bernays explains, a reaction set in. The minority discovered they could mold the mind of the masses, essentially guiding their newly gained strength in whatever direction they desired. Just consider the sheer scale of what they were dealing with back then. 22,128. That is the astonishing number of periodical publications listed in America in 1928. That number visually demonstrates the massive fragmentation of the public mind at the time. With the printing press, railroads, telegraphs, and telephones all coming into play, ideas were spreading instantaneously, creating a totally new, massively complex social landscape. And because of this rapid spread of ideas, society just fractured into thousands of distinct, overlapping niches. Look at some of the actual bizarrely specific groups Bernays lists from the World Almanac of 1928. You had the Association to Abolish War, sure, but you also had the Anti-Cigarette League, the Anti-Profanity League, and get this, conventions for things like the Terrapin Derby, complete with banquets and orations. Society was endlessly divided by all these social, political, economic, racial, and religious cleavages. But here is where Bernays makes a really crucial observation. These thousands of groups, they interlace. A hypothetical citizen, let's just call him John Jones, isn't just one thing. He's a Rotarian, a churchgoer, a member of a fraternal order, a voter, a golfer, and he's on the Chamber of Commerce. The opinions John receives at his Rotary Club, he's inevitably going to disseminate into the other groups where he has influence. This invisible, intertwining structure of groupings is exactly the mechanism by which mass thinking is organized and simplified. Section 3. Reclaiming the word propaganda, a misunderstood tool. So, if society is this deeply fragmented but interconnected web, how does the invisible government actually guide it? Well, it requires a very specific tool, one Bernays felt was completely misunderstood by the public. He was well aware that propaganda carried a highly unpleasant, sinister connotation, especially right after the First World War. But he points out its perfectly neutral historical origins. The word actually traces back to 1627, to the College of the Propaganda at Rome, which was founded by Pope Urban VIII for the education of missionary priests. Originally, it literally just meant any institution or scheme for propagating a doctrine or system. Bernays argues that propaganda is, in its true sense, a perfectly legitimate form of human activity. He offers this ethical justification. Truth is mighty and must prevail, and if any body of men believe that they have discovered a valuable truth, it is not merely their privilege but their duty to disseminate that truth. According to Bernays, whether propaganda is good or bad depends entirely on the merit of the cause being urged and the correctness of the information published. At its core, it's just the organized effort to spread a belief. Section 4. The rubber stamp mind and the illusion of free thought. Okay, so how does this redefined propaganda actually land in the minds of the public? The crucial point here is that democratic doctrine always assumed universal literacy would educate the common man to control his environment and rule with a fit, independent mind. But Bernays delivers a pretty biting critique here. He states that instead of empowering the common man to think independently, universal literacy merely exposed millions of people to the exact same stimuli, basically creating duplicate minds. He writes that universal literacy has given man rubber stamps, inked with advertising slogans, with editorials, with published scientific data, with the trivialities of the tabloids and the platitudes of history, but quite innocent of original thought. Because millions are exposed to these identical imprints, original thought becomes incredibly rare. We are simply stamping the same prepackaged ideas onto our worldview over and over again. Section 5. Regimenting the public through the invisible hand. This is where we see how this invisible manipulation plays out seamlessly in our daily lives, particularly through the media. Bernays provides this brilliant, real-world analysis to prove his point. He looks at a single random page of the New York Times and points out that out of 8 important news stories, 4 of them are actually propaganda. Casual readers accept these headlines as spontaneous, organic happenings. But look at this. A headline reading 12 nations warn China wasn't just a spontaneous event. It was a report published by the State Department with the specific purpose of presenting the American public a picture of the State Department's position. Another headline, Pritchett reports Zionism will fail, was a viewpoint broadcast with all the authority of the Carnegie Foundation just to ensure the public would hear and believe it. These aren't sinister lies, Bernays explains, but they are absolutely conscious, organized directions given to events by specific groups to influence public opinion. And that brings us to the real core takeaway from Bernays' work. Modern propaganda is a consistent, enduring effort to create or shape events to influence the relations of the public to an enterprise, idea, or group. Bernays wants us to understand that this regimentation is universal. It is continuous. It's happening in politics, in finance, in charity, and in education, the whole shebang. It is quite literally the executive arm of the invisible government, organizing the chaos of our modern world. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. As you go about your day, as you scroll through your feeds, as you make your purchases, and especially the next time you read the news, try applying Bernays' 1928 lens to your modern life. Ask yourself, who organized this reality for me? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the mechanics behind the curtain.